Welcome back from lunch. Thank you so much for joining us. Really delighted to be here. I'm Rimma, not Rimma, but it is a tough one, I know, in a British context. So we are super delighted to be hosting a panel today on practical steps for tackling bias in software engineering in the age of AI. It is a topic that I think has been vexing for quite some time. We'll be looking at it primarily from a Gen AI perspective, which all of us know is kind of the key theme dominating many industries today, and a really important opportunity to tackle something that is so important and core to all our businesses, and look at it from a business opportunity perspective. So in addition to being VP of Strategic Growth at FINOS, I have the honor of being the team lead for our DEI SIG, which is a group that formed within FINOS about 2 years ago. And many of you, I think, have been actively engaged and driving our Big Boost Mondays event, which really helped put the DEI SIG and FINOS on the map as being active promoters and proponents for having more diversity, inclusion across the financial services industry. And we work closely with organizations like Citi, NatWest, and Morgan Stanley, who have really been driving forces for this area. And this year we have a really ambitious program of activities that's looking at how do we develop really the best practices for embedding inclusivity, diversity into our organizations across financial services, and making it a really important driver for talent development, but also across how the whole financial services institutions world works. That's really important. DEI, it should not be just a side project, but something that is embedded in the culture of all financial services institutions operating today, and we certainly see it as an important business accelerator and advantage. So if you or your organization are engaged in this area, I really encourage you to get involved. Come and talk to us after the panel. We are looking both for collaborators and experts who are committed and passionate about this. So today we have a really exciting panel with leading experts who are looking to deliver more inclusive technology that really puts responsible AI and avoidance of bias and unintended consequence as you roll out Gen AI at the forefront of your business processes. So while software development in engineering, we know has had biases in the past, today's panel really will focus on things from a Gen AI perspective. And as you know, this Gen AI revolution is moving forward at lightning speed. And what we want to do today is share with you some of the important ideas and practical steps that many of you are already introducing in your organizations, but give you further thought and clear examples of how to take this forward. So with that, I'd like to invite on stage our illustrious panelists. Please come and join me. Great to have you here. I'm going to ask each of you to give a short introduction on who you are and what you do.
I'll go first then.
Jason, please.
So I'm Jason. I'm the Chief Digital Officer within our data and commerce practices within Publicis Group. And I guess what I do in a day job is drive greater use of data and AI in particular, both internally, so working with our internal agencies, which kind of act as like separate businesses in their own right, and then externally with clients, particularly around marketing transformation, that kind of stuff.
I'm Leanne, and I have the longest job title, I've just realised, but I essentially ensure that we have that licence to operate and that we're moving the business forwards in the right direction, especially ensuring that we're building the right people capability.
I'm Declan O'Gorman. I lead engineering at NatWest, so we look after our common practices, people and tools. And as a second hat, I also help to sponsor our Women in Tech and gender networks and sit on the Business in the Community and Tech She Can steering committees as well.
Hi, I'm Prachi Kasodhan, and I'm the Enterprise CTO within Microsoft's Financial Services vertical. So in this role, my key objective is I work with one of the largest global banks in the world, and I own strategy and execution. And as you can imagine, given coming from Microsoft, even though we are having tons and tons of digital transformation and cloud conversation, Gen AI basically is at the forefront of pretty much every other conversations that we are engaged in. Happy to be here.
Thank you. So delighted to have all of you on stage with me today. So it's clear that, bias in software engineering and having more diverse teams has been rather a big challenge for some time, but certainly the rise of Gen AI gives us an opportunity to reset and think about, what could be the right kind of business advantage for taking this forward, and it behooves us to do this correctly. So the first thing I'd like to ask is, why is this important for the financial services industry? And what could be the advantages of building inclusive software and responsible AI? And I think in the first instance, we're going to look at that topic from a diverse team perspective, and I'll ask Leanne to kick off on that.
Yeah, for me, the reason diversity I thought is really important is I really do believe it's a source of competitive advantage. And the reason I say that is because different perspectives that diverse teams can bring really enhance innovation and can enable business growth. And I do have some really geeky facts that I've stored away. The first, from a paper that I read that Corn Ferry did actually recently, was that diverse and inclusive teams make better decisions 87% of the time. And also 75% of inclusive innovators are more likely to have their ideas productionized. And there's lots of stats out there, but those are the two that I actually remembered. So, that's my train of thought. So just thinking about the diversity and the different perspectives, something I actually came across quite recently, and it was a really nice reminder that people who are different from you will challenge you. And I think sometimes we can be really uncomfortable with that. But actually, it's really important that we don't have the same people around the table. And that actually, when we're looking at our design processes and our decision-making process, that we have a kind of diverse panel of thought.
Excellent. Declan?
I think we're all going through the wonderful world of automation and AI in our businesses. At NatWest, we've embraced it, and I think have done for a long time now. So as a couple of examples, around about 50% of our chatbot requests that customers come through to us with are now handled with no human interaction at all, freeing up our agents to do much more valuable jobs and really supporting our customers in the moment that matters to them the most. 6,000 of our colleagues are using machine learning models to help protect against fraud and fin crime and really allowing us to direct our attention to those most in need. And we've recently got now more than 1,500 of our software engineers rolled out with Gen AI code assistant tools on their desktops, in their IDEs, helping to drive real value across the business. It's not without risk, though, and I think we have known from iterations past, the typewriter pools of the 1990s, that there are probably three areas that we're really focused on trying to make sure we address consciously. To Leanne's point, how do we make sure there are diverse teams powering this? 27% female software engineers at NatWest, only 10% at the most senior grades. Secondly, how do we make sure we're using unbiased data and accessible design to ensure that actually we're coding and creating these solutions for the benefit of all, not just the people who are creating them? And lastly, how do we make sure that we're thinking of the societal impact? So there's an interesting International Labour Organization study that shows that the impact on female-occupied jobs from these types of Gen AI models is going to be significantly outweighed versus male. So think of clerical, administrative, healthcare, educational type roles. How do we support our societies and our communities in pivoting their skills to be able to best accommodate the next wave of technology that's going to come through?
Thank you. And Prachi, over to you.
Yeah, sure. So first of all, I hope you're using the right platform, because it seems like NatWest is doing a lot of good progress there. So Rimma, if it's okay, let me approach this kind of where you started off with, why is this important? And part of this is, I know, unless you've been living under a rock, just as you said, Rimma, the whole Gen AI, how quickly it's improving. And not just the technology, it is the economic outcomes that I think you touched on a little bit, Declan, that it is really, really spearheading, and there is just so much momentum. And therefore, it is so critical for us to get this right. And if I had to put it in a financial services context, here is how we look at it, and this is how we go to market when we are talking to companies. Number one, the reason you want to get the responsibility and the trust right is, I would start with employees, kind of where you were going. So with employees, think of it this way, that employees today really, really care about what are the policies and what does your Gen AI represent. So if that's not being done correctly, and whether that AI is towards them or for internal productivity, or you as a brand are going out to the market, it's going to start chipping away at your employee confidence, and it almost becomes an employee retention issue. So that, to me, is a very good reason why one should think about it. Number two, actually, is a segue around brand integrity. You've all worked very hard. Your banks, your financial services institution, it runs on trust. You worked so hard to create the brand integrity, and that integrity can get chipped away and get eroded extremely quickly again if you haven't thought through the inclusivity principles. Number three, I would say, is actually the upside. It's the opportunity. There are so many revenue adjacencies. There are so many net new things that you can do, broaden your customer base. Because if done right, you are actually going to be able to create this immense revenue opportunity, immense brand credibility opportunity. And I think I'll finally wrap up by saying, if the first three didn't get you, the next one will. It is the law. It is the regulation. So it, as everybody knows, back in the US, as well as everywhere around the globe, pretty much every week we are hearing new laws, new regulation, new papers coming out. This is not going to come to an end. So obviously we need to make sure we are complying with everything. And then most importantly, there are laws on the books today that, again, we as financial services institution already have been complying with, and Gen AI does not take any of that away. So I would say those four reasons are really the critical reasons why everybody in the industry should be paying attention on this.
Thanks, Prachi. Jason?
Yeah, I think it's good to hear what the others are saying. What I'm trying to do is come up with something practical. So typically, an organization is going to ask themselves three questions. Can I do this with AI or any other software? Should we do it? And how do we do it? And the should is the ethics piece, and that's what organizations are struggling with, and inclusivity comes within there. So what conscious adoption is something that I'm working on at the moment, which is, as I say, is a practical framework to allow organizations to try and answer that question. There's no right or wrong answer. But what it does is it takes a systems thinking approach and tries to, through a canvas and a framework, get people to work through what might be those unintended consequences that you've got in that question that you're trying to answer. And that can be looking at it through multiple lenses. So there's lenses that you want to look at it from a brand, an employee, a society perspective, the stuff that Declan touched on there. But also you want to look at it with collaborative teams. So don't just look at it from a software engineering perspective. Bring in the business people, bring in, whoever it is, create those diverse teams so you can start to unpick away at those unintended consequences.
Awesome. So you've touched on the importance of conscious adoption and also creating diverse teams. We're going to move to the practical steps for the development of responsible AI. And Leanne, you certainly outlined the advantages of having diverse teams. What are you doing to practically put that in practice at NatWest?
There are lots of positive things, actually. But I think, first of all, it's really important, just thinking practically, that you measure your current state. So even if the data's not where it needs to be, knowing your start point and the progress that you've made is really key. So as Declan said earlier, we started off with 21% of female software engineers across all grades. We're now at 27%. What I'll do is I'll just touch on a couple of three kind of core elements around attraction, reskilling and retention. So just in terms of making sure we bring in the right people, we encourage our hiring managers to have diverse interview panels. We have something called the Recruitment Yes Check. It's a really great tool for line managers and has a lot of prompt questions, but in essence ensures that we keep honest. It means that we're making sure that we're taking a kind of consistent and fair approach in our hiring process. We also have inclusion champions as well, and we use those champions on those diverse interview panels, which is really positive. And we also have our internal and external communities where we share and continue to learn. From a reskilling point of view, we've got a really successful program, and actually within enterprise engineering, we've managed to align quite a number of reskillers who have made fantastic progress and done some really great work. And I'm just going to look to Declan to make sure I get this fact correct, but I believe that we've got 45% of junior female software engineers versus the 21% industry average, which just shows the brilliant progress that we're making. And then just in terms of retention, I think it's just to really keep listening to our colleagues. So I was speaking to a couple of people last week who'd come through our reskilling program, and career pathways are something that I keep and continue to hear about, and it's something we really, really need to make sure we focus on. Also, empowering our employees through employee-led networks. We have a Women in Tech network that's proved really valuable in terms of setting that direction. And then finally, just to talk a little bit about the kind of culture. For me, if we have diverse teams, we'll have a really great culture. But for me, it's really embedding that diversity of thought. And none of this stuff should just be seen as a tick box exercise. And something I heard recently about DE&I fatigue really alarmed me. So really, we just need to keep on trying to embed, really creating that open atmosphere where people can continue to share and debate ideas.
Excellent. No, it's exciting to hear about how you're applying this to all areas of the talent development process. That's certainly important. Jason, you have some practical ideas to share with us? Yes, an idea or two?
Yeah, call to action to everyone in the room. I think it would be great. Look, one of the issues we have with engineers, whether they're machine learning engineers, whatever it might be, they tend to be of a particular type. And so what if we opened up the diversity there? So could we create a pipeline from school right through to the workplace where we use an apprenticeship scheme to train people not only in the hard skills, so these are people that might not either think they can go to university or maybe can't afford to go to university. So we bring that diversity into the business, and we teach them in that apprenticeship the hard skills that you'd need, but the sort of thread throughout, if you like, is a responsible, ethical approach to it. So you then hopefully end up in a situation where you've diversified your workforce, plus they're already thinking about diversity and inclusion and consciousness when they're adopting this stuff, which again I think is one of the issues that we face. So and there are schemes like the apprenticeship levy to be able to do that. So I think it's an idea. If anyone's interested, come and see me afterwards.
That's a UK specific thing, right? But it's something that companies can look to introduce is apprenticeship programs that will really diversify the kinds of thought process that's applied to complex areas like how do you address bias, right? So really exciting. And Declan, how are you looking at this from a software engineering perspective of getting that avoidance of bias?
I think it's a lovely problem to have because this mirrors a lot of the software problems I think we have on a regular basis. So 3 quick things in terms of practical thoughts to take away. I was at the Times Top 50 launch last week and I heard the amazing phrase, think of inclusion the same way you think of security. It doesn't have a business case, but it just needs to be done. It just makes sense to everyone involved. So it's not an if, it's an are you doing it and how are you embedding it. But my 3 questions to you is, if you look at the team that you work with today, do you understand their diversity characteristics? Are you measuring it? Probably not for most, I suspect. The second one is, this isn't a game a bit like software where we have to reinvent it every time ourselves. Open source is an amazing contributor in the software space. We should open source these solutions. So if you're not a signatory of Tech She Can, helping school-age kids understand careers in software, if you're not involved in groups like the DEI SIG within FINOS, then please come and sign up and get involved. And lastly, have a think about your action agenda. It's great to have the conversation, and I think we all love to have a chat, but what specific initiatives are you taking in your organization or in your community to try and make a small dent of a change and a small improvement in this space?
And can you talk a little bit about how you're bringing open source to NatWest and the types of projects, because DEI is just one, right? But this whole area of addressing bias in Gen AI is one that also is open to innovation.
It's a great opportunity, and James, who's in the cloud, will be on stage later on as our open source lead, so you can ask him exactly those same questions. We see it as a real enabler, both open source at an industry level, but inner source, more importantly, within our own company, about how do we get teams to collaborate across boundaries, how do we build on shared assets rather than reinvent, how do we get people to be curious about what's out there. And we found it's an amazing opportunity to try and generate some understanding, awareness, and empathy for those around the conversation, and really make sure it's an inclusive space for both people of all backgrounds, but also new ideas to really flourish. So within FINOS, things like Git proxy, we've got FDC3, common cloud controls, etc. So it's really starting to embed as a way of working that's changing the culture and landscape of NatWest.
Awesome. Okay, we're going to move on and look at how you look to develop the right approach to data, because that's certainly a key area of how you look to avoid bias in Gen AI. And there's addressing bias in data models and data sets, starting from infrastructure, but all the way to consumer products and services that you're looking to evolve. So, Jason, if you could maybe give us some ideas of how you're looking at this and what are important ways that we can look to focus on data in the right way in this process.
Sure. Look, I mean, it's a huge issue that everyone faces. And I think probably the point I'd like to make is really the open source community is a great way to explore how we can try and reduce this. So no one has to go and share proprietary data or anything like that, but there are techniques and frameworks that we can use that will help us address that. And those techniques and frameworks can be shared. And best practice can be shared. So I'm thinking about things like, can we use synthetic data to fill some gaps that we may have in data sets? Can we, what's the best way of utilizing something like red teaming? So all of that stuff can be explored, I think, in an open source environment through collaboration that doesn't necessarily involve you kind of disclosing any kind of proprietary data. But I know, Prachi, we spoke, and you've got quite a few ideas on this, so I'm going to
Absolutely.
hand over.
So, yeah, no, thank you for getting us started there, Jason. If that's okay, I mean, I'm happy to share from a Microsoft perspective how we are attacking this issue. And I'm going to try to distill down stuff that we've been doing now for a number of years. For us, it may feel like that this has only started, I think we were talking the other day, Leanne, 18 plus months back, but from an overall AI perspective, again, right, most banks are not new to it, same thing with us. We really started working in anger on this issue around how do you govern and how do you think about responsible AI, back in 2016. So it really started off with an article that Satya wrote at the time, I think in a Wired magazine, and that led to us creating our first AI board back in 2018, and that led to kind of us thinking about holistically everything that you mentioned, right, everybody's talking about, starting from data, how do I think about it? So let me try to distill almost 10 years worth of work that Microsoft has been doing in this area. And I say that only because maybe there is just so much stuff that banks are doing, and then there is a way for us to do a give and take here. The way we think about it, and I think it's mostly the entire industry, everybody's talked about responsible AI, but I think the term responsibility really denotes trust. And how do you think about it? We think about it really in 5 or 6 different ways. So the way we think is we say, whatever you build, whether it's your first-party AI, or are you building a tooling for someone else, or you're just embedding AI, which what most companies are doing. You're not really an AI company, but you're using the technology. Think about accountability. Think about transparency. Think about fairness and safety, reliability, i.e. the explainability of the model. And then last but not the least, think about data privacy, security, and are you being inclusive? So we essentially, after years of work and research, we said, here are the 6 pillars, the way Microsoft is thinking about it, and we are still on a journey. Now, what do these 6 pillars mean? We actually have policy statements, we have standards, and we have requirements, which I know a lot of technologists in the room will understand because most banks think the same way, that you write a policy statement and then you actually tell people what to do and what good looks like. So we're not reinventing the wheel. Out of the 6 pillars that I mentioned, data privacy and inclusiveness, those policies have always existed in every industry, specifically in FSI. So what Microsoft did was we actually just implement those 2 things. We inherit from there, but then we wrote requirements for all of the other 4 standards. At the very top at the company, we have established a responsible AI board, and the AI responsible board has lots of different things, but I would distill it down to maybe 4 or 5 key important ways how we are actually actualizing it. So the 6 pillars that I talked about, the actual job of writing the policies, the requirements against those policies, talking about even tooling and best practices. We are being very specific. So we don't let every engineering group go and create their own tools and best practice. So we do that, and this is part of the responsible AI board. That's their first thing. Write the policy and make it really actionable. Number 2, we look at governance. That's how we actualize it. So which means every engineering team, if you have an AI requirement, you have to go through levels of approvals with the safety review board and make sure that those policy and requirements are consistently applied. So this is the other job they do. The third thing we do is, or this review board does, is enablement. We work on enabling internal Microsoft developers. We also work with customers, and we work with partners because we want to share what we are doing, and together as an ecosystem, how do we make each other better?
So what advice are you giving to customers today? Because AI is not quite at the advanced level that is ready for execution across all use cases. Maybe you can speak to that just briefly.
Absolutely. So sensitive use case is a very important part that we look at. We have very strict guardrails, and this is what we share with the customers as well, that please do not use. There are certain use cases which are against minority groups or going to make economic decisions, as an example. We need to make sure do not touch those use cases. There are some very basic use cases that we can start off with. That becomes a very practical thing, and I would say embed the requirements in your engineering team. And one last advice, if I can give you guys, make sure that at a company level, or at least at your line of business level, you have a board or a group of people who are really looking at your requirements and making sure, kind of, Jason, where you were going, should you be using AI for it, and is this the right way to do it?
Yeah, I think when we were preparing for this, you referred to AI as a grumpy teenager at the moment, right? So
Yeah.
needing a little bit of guidance and oversight.
We totally say it's an intern, right? It's a very bright intern, but you have to guide this intern and make sure, just the way you're never going to get this intern to cut a $10 million PO, you'd be responsible, so put human in the loop.
Awesome. Declan, what's happening at NatWest around your Gen AI avoidance of bias
Super
practice?
brief, I'm conscious of time. I don't think this is a new problem for us to solve, right? We've done machine learning, we've done data science, we've done accessibility testing and software testing for a long time. So it's applying, I think, to the points raised already, a lot of those existing approaches into the world of AI. I think 2 points to call out. So as a regulated industry, most of us, model risk and model validation is a key control for us, and we really use that very rigorously to make sure that the inputs to the models and the outputs of them meet the fairness criteria that we would set as an organization and our customers would expect of us. So I'm sure you all have similar controls in place, but worthwhile ensuring that they're continuing to evolve. And lastly, for me, one area of continued focus is around third-party models, so where we're reliant on other companies to provide us AI services. Microsoft as an example with things like Copilot in Office 365. How do we make sure that they are applying a similar bar of fairness and bias testing in the models that we're receiving? And how are we making sure we're not receiving model drift and sort of differing outputs over time? So there's a lot of work still needed on how do we have a proper supplier framework in place to make sure we're safe on that front.
Great. Well, thank you so much for so much practical advice. Now, looking forward, I mean, there's a whole regulatory compliance piece that obviously everyone will have to put in place the right processes. But we also, I think, want to see this as a business opportunity. So from your perspective, what do we need to do planning-wise to make sure that this delivers the right business value? And how can inclusive technology and responsible AI, how do we plan for it to really succeed in financial services? So Prachi, I'll ask you first, because you've been at this for a while from a responsible AI perspective, but specifically for financial institutions as well. What's the right way forward? And also, most of us here are FINOS members, and many are involved in the DEI SIG. Others are involved in other projects. Like, how do you see FINOS helping to contribute to the resolution going forward?
I think 100%, and I think as everybody's saying, and I know, Declan, you touched on it, this is a massive opportunity. I wouldn't call it a problem. It's a massive opportunity, and the way every bank is looking at it, and we are just so grateful. Again, from Microsoft perspective, we look across so many different banks and financial services. Everybody's trying to solve the same problem or similar set of problems. This is where FINOS comes in. So I think, as you already mentioned, there is a DEI SIG. I believe my colleagues talked about AI readiness SIG as well. So if you guys are already not part of both of these SIGs, please get involved. And that's what I mean by commonality of problems. So things like, how should you govern? What is important? What are the practical requirements? Those are the kind of things we are actually evaluating now. And the idea is, obviously, rather than every bank trying to do this on their own, wouldn't it be great to do it as a community? And then obviously you take it back to your organization and make it your own. So I think that would be my one call to action. If you haven't already registered in these two SIGs, please do so.
Thank you. Awesome suggestions. Jason, what are your thoughts?
Well, I'll be very quick and very brief. Look, we've got to lean into this ethics issue. It's not just the financial services sector. I think all businesses need to do that. We can't run away from it, so we have to lean into it. The best way of leaning into it, because we're all facing the same issues, is to collaborate. And I think the open source community is a great way to do that, because we can all share the learnings, the practical tips, the frameworks, all that kind of stuff to help us.
Thank you so much. And Declan, what would you say?
I think it's going to be unsurprising at an open source conference that my one word would be, let's open source this problem, right? Sign up to Tech She Can, sign up to the business in the community, sign up to the SIG, come and get involved. We really would value your insights and input.
Thank you. Leanne, the last word is yours.
10 seconds. Yeah, just as everybody has said, sign up to, I'm a DE&I committee member. I think it's really trying to use that platform, though, to think about how we share best practices and really embed that diversity of thought.
Awesome. Well, I'd like to thank my amazing panel for sharing these really important insights, and please join me in thanking them. Thanks.